Yeah. He just won his election.
When he texted me, I was like, looked at my calendar, I was like, that's right. I don't have anything planned this week. That's awesome. I'm like, actually, I can do that. So,
All right.
Well, I mean, we were, because we wanted to give you the opportunity as first, but we already had our backup plans in place if you couldn't come on.
yeah.
And so,
All right.
yeah. Usually when we can hear ourselves, that means
There we go.
are we rolling?
My dog. Get right to it.
So Mike does this thing where he'll just start rolling and
Just not tell you.
Yeah.
And
sometimes we're talking about, just organic things and it picks it up. I do like it because it kind of gives you that really raw conversation.
The
beforehand.
subject, the material he's gotten probably from people not knowing he was recording is
That is not true.
Probably
It's
all kinds
It's
of-
always like menial stuff. It's not like important stuff we're talking about before the podcast.
So I shouldn't talk about ignoring 30-6 signs or anything like that.
I mean, that's up to you. I'd love to hear all about it, to be honest with you, but
We were literally just talking
I am not
today.
saying I would ever do that.
I am not saying this. Sweet. If we're rolling, we're going to go ahead and get into it. Welcome to Nick's Right Podcast, where Nick is always right. Nick, if you are not on cue, and I'm about to say this, I'm going to be very upset. Oh, millennial.
Gen X. Hey. Every now and then, my
Thank
timing
you.
is impeccable.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, impeccable with 2 C's.
We got a great guest on. This is actually a guest we were going to have on earlier, but he had a conflict, which is completely okay. I'm just glad we are able to have him on now. We're going to pray and then get into our sponsors and then get straight into it, introduce our awesome guest. And I don't know about you, Nick, but I'm really wanting to be educated on what a railroad commissioner what the responsibility is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
'cause
well,
I don't think I know.
You already stole my thunder, man. That was going to be my first question. But I didn't want to give any spoilers and say we got the railroad commissioner on tonight.
Well,
but you already kind of did that. So.
I did. I'm sorry. I'm on a roll tonight.
Which is awesome. That's
Lord Jesus, thank you. Thank you for this time. Thank you for the ability to come here to have conversations, to talk about the things that are going on in Texas, to discuss important things, and just the ability to have free speech. We thank you. We praise you. And may every moment go viral. In Jesus' name, for your glory. Amen.
Amen.
So, Patriot Mobile, patriotmobile.com/NRP, patriotmobile.com with the code NRP, get your free first month. LIVV audio, LIVV audio, the headphones we're wearing, LIVV, not LIVE, LIVVaudio.com with the code NRP, get a 15% discount on premium headphones. And then Nick's Right Podcast merch. We have the hats. Nick's wearing his Deus Vault hat. Talk, Nick, talk.
Deus Volt. About Deus Volt, or
No,
are we
I just
talking
need you to
about
talk
the?
so they could see your hat.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah,
But
yeah. Well, it's
anyway.
on backwards.
We also have the graphic
I'll get on
novel
straight
Beyond
for you.
Sight. If you buy the graphic novel at Nick's Right Podcast merch, you will get it for $5 off compared to what the publisher sells it for. Great story. We sell 9,000 copies, and we will be greenlit for the movie.
Bam.
Boom. And now we're going to introduce our awesome guest. Actually, before we do that, make sure to follow us on Substack and Nick's Right Podcast. If you become a paid subscriber, you will get first access to all of our future projects and episodes. Alrighty. Bo French.
Oh, friend.
Hey, guys.
How's it going, brother?
It's awesome.
It's
a-
awesome
it's a good
to
week
finally
be in
have you in
Texas.
studio. Like,
Yeah.
It feels good to win, doesn't it?
it does.
I mean, it's pretty incredible, really, if you think about it. Because, January, I was the long shot. Polling had me at 6%.
Oh, did it? I didn't know this.
Really?
There were 4 other people in the race. Everyone just saw me as like, oh, he's a social media guy. He's not a serious candidate.
No way. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That proves a
okay.
point that I've been having. Like, you have to have a social media presence.
It
Like,
helps.
It
helps.
does. Like, because in today's world, if you don't have a social media presence and you're trying to run for an important position, like, no one knows you.
Yeah. Either you allow the left-wing media to define you, or the establishment to define you, or you get to define yourself.
There you go.
That's a really good way to look at it, because that will happen.
Yeah. Well, look,
That's-
Donald Trump showed this, right? I mean,
Mhm.
calling them all fake news and having his Twitter before he got banned on Twitter. People really, they connected with him. They knew exactly who he was and what he was thinking and what he wanted to do. And it didn't matter what the media said. And that was kind of the position I found myself in.
Yeah. And you're definitely conservative.
Allegedly. Yeah.
Allegedly.
Oh, that's interesting.
He knows
You
what
say
that word
allegedly.
means.
All right.
Well, because when it comes to railroad commissioner, can you actually you ask the question?
Mr. French, Mr. Bo, What in the world is a railroad commissioner? Because I know that it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with railroads.
It used to. I mean, that's the genesis of the name was in the 1800s, and Texas had a regulatory agency over the railroad industry, which was a big important industry back then. And as we started discovering oil deposits here in Texas and producing oil, most of that was moved by rail. So then the Railroad Commission, was monitoring that and regulating all that. And then eventually that industry grew to be so big that it overwhelmed and far surpassed what the rail industry was doing. And so they eventually moved all the elements, all the sort of transportation elements of that out of the commission, which is the regulatory body over the oil and gas industry now. And that's what it's been for a long time.
So it's the railroad evolved.
Correct.
Kind of keeping up with the times. And now it's more natural gas and oil and
we're
energy,
stuck with the name because it would take a constitutional amendment in Texas to change the name. And, getting, things like that done in Texas are just so far down the priority list.
Railroad commissioner is kind of cool.
It's also historic.
Yeah, it's historic. Yeah. And I was reading I was just skating through your website and I love the word wildcatter. We've all heard the word wildcatter, right? But explain what a wildcatter is and what that has to do with today's notion of the railroad commissioner.
I think when most people think of the oil industry, they think of Texaco or Exxon or the big names like the gas stations that you go to, right? But for most of Texas history, the oil in the ground was discovered by people going out and just drilling holes and drilling wells, not knowing if there was oil there or not. And there are still people that do that. There's a big article I just read this week about a friend of mine in Fort Worth whose company has taken a huge risk drilling a big well and very expensive deep well in Louisiana. It's a wildcat well. And so this is the kind of thing that still happens, even though these big majors are still very important to the industry. But there are lots of smaller operators and smaller companies out there that are just going out and trying to discover oil.
Wildcatting,
yeah,
basically. Okay, I take it they're not digging with shovels though.
Well, no, they're drilling.
Drilling actual
drilling
wells.
All right.
Kind of. I'm guessing what you would see in Landman, like that type of.
You know what? It's exactly like Landman.
So everyone can understand that's what it is.
That's what it is.
I mean, cool. I like Landman. So far, it hasn't gone too woke that it's still easy to watch.
Oh, I like Landman. It's good.
I mean, look. First of all, Taylor Sheridan has done an amazing job. With I live in Fort Worth, and so the whole sort of Taylor Sheridan orbit is revolving around Fort Worth a lot now.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It kind of makes it fun. Highlights a lot of things that are going on in Fort Worth, and so he's been great for the city. And that show in particular, I love because I grew up in Midland. And
yeah.
And so it takes place in Midland and in Fort Worth, and so in fact, I still have an office in Midland. I'm still there, regularly. So it's kind of fun to see that highlighted in a TV show. Yeah. I mean, look, there's a lot of drama and things that are
there's drama
fictional, obviously, but. It's still fun.
Well, now you say fictional, but not to get too far off into this rabbit hole, the movie, not the TV series of Friday Night Lights, that was Midland, right?
So
that was Midland.
I graduated from high school in 1988, which was the year that Friday Night Lights was about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really?
Sweet.
Wait, was that your high school?
Well, I did not go to, so that was Permian.
Permian,
in Odessa. Okay. And so there were sort of four big high schools between Midland and Odessa. And had I stayed in Midland for high school, I would have gone to Midland High. But I went to military school instead.
Okay.
But I was friends with a lot of that's my age group. So
yeah. Can you confirm something with me? Because Nick doesn't believe me when I say this, even though I believe I've done the research and I've gotten confirmation. That movie, the Friday Night Lights movie, the names and logos that are used in the movie are not the actual name and logo of the actual high school.
Actually, I can't recall that. I saw the movie when it came out, but that was 20 years ago. I don't remember exactly if they changed that or not.
Okay,
People
in Hollywood have told me no, the creator of that IP or that story, he went to his high school to get permission to use a logo. And they said no, so he just changed the name, and it became a.
We'll have to research that, Nick, because
we'll have to go back and check that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if they're using Permian Basin, which they did, that was the Permian.
Mojo was the
Mojo
name of the team.
Yeah, the Mojo.
That's definitely different because they're the Panthers and. in the movie.
In Friday Night Lights?
I'm pretty sure.
Are you the movie or the series?
The movie, not the series.
I want to have to look at that. Anyway, it's my second favorite sports movie other than The Natural. I mean,
that's a good one too.
Gotta love The Natural. But
oh my gosh, I don't think I've seen The Natural.
You're probably too young.
I'm the old millennial, and I'm the young one at the table. This is great.
Yeah.
Wait,
you're
you're Gen X, right?
Yes, of course.
Yes, he
graduated '88, man.
Yeah,
that's straight up Gen X. All right.
Are you the like prime Gen X? Like you're one of the first?
No. The first was 62.
No.
I think.
Yeah, early '60s.
Yeah. Early '60s.
Which
was when that changed.
That's still kind of baby boomers, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there is a blurry line between the generations.
Yeah. And I think all generations we cross pollinate a lot, but
look, my dad was born in the 20s, and so I had an older dad, but he was raised by his grandparents. Oh, so like
born in the
I had like old school,
yeah, old school upbringing.
Always, yeah,
I love that.
That's amazing. So wait, your dad, born in the 80s, was raised by his grandparents who were born in the 20s. Sorry, they were probably born in, if they were say 50 when he was born, which is reasonable, right? Then they would have been born in 1870s.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
The 70s there, or like right after the Civil War.
Correct.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, man. I want to ask you some hard questions.
Great.
Again, because I think we'll get a good rise out of you if I ask these questions. As the railroad commissioner, do you have any control on what's going on with the Islamification of Texas?
I mean, I think there are things that you can do in any elected position. So when I look back, I was the Tarrant County Republican Party chairman.
Okay.
Didn't have direct purview over, any issue in Texas really, other than just having a platform to talk about issues, which is what I did. And, some would argue that I really influenced that conversation. And there was no other elected official in Texas talking about the Islamification of Texas until I was. Now I have a background, which is why I was, relevant. It was relevant, which is why I was talking about it. And so I think, once I started talking about it, I was roundly criticized. CARE came after me, tried to cancel me.
Really?
People in my own party, asked me to resign. And, I just said no. Because
I love it.
This is a really important issue for Texas. And look, this is a position I'm running for is a statewide position. I traveled all over the whole state talking to people, and it was just really clear that this was the number one issue that people cared about.
Yeah.
And, it's probably more relevant to people who are in the big metro areas. DFW is 8.5 million people or whatever. Houston's metro is, almost that, I think 8 million or something. And so that's where most of this is tending to congregate. But, you drive around. I was in Midland the other day and it was like, oh, look, there's a mosque I've never noticed. And, they're popping up everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I think people really feel that. Now I've been to smaller towns. They're like, well, we don't have any mosques here. But, they see what's happening because, everybody, even if you're in a small town, you inevitably go to Fort Worth or Dallas or something for, a meeting or a, shopping or whatever. Yeah. And so, they see it and they're like, wait, what's going on here? But really, it's not so much about what you see and feel. To me, it's really more about what they say. And,
exactly.
We just go on YouTube and look anywhere on social media and you will see these imams who are just literally preaching about how, what they plan to do, what their intent is. And so it's not that I'm fear mongering. I'm just agreeing. Yes, these are what they want. This is what they want to do. And this is why we need to stop them.
Yeah. Did you, I'm sure you know about this, the internal memo that they found for the Muslim Brotherhood in 1991 that explained what they would do. And if they couldn't do what they're basically doing now, they would just breed us out.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, this is what they've done, for 1400 years. So this is not like new information. Yeah. I think for a lot of people though, they're just sort of waking up to this reality.
Is it too late?
No, I don't even think it's too late for England or France.
Okay, that's saying something.
Yeah, which is, I would argue they're, 5 or 10, maybe 10 years ahead of us. And as bad as it is there, with stabbings and beheadings and
shootings
happening,
and,
the guy that
vans and
the guy that tried to behead the guy in the street the other day, and so, but I would argue that they actually could reverse it, but it requires doing things that make a lot of people uncomfortable.
So just confronting them.
Right. Well, no, you have to remove those people from your country, but it could be done.
I love how like elegantly he's saying that.
Yeah.
Even though it's a very it's a very physical thing that you would have to do is like remove them from your country.
So that's
But I agree. I do agree with you.
I agree. Removing them from the country is the solution, I think. But the question is, what does that look like? What do you think that looks like?
Well, it's the choice is binary. You either don't do anything about it and they eventually take over.
Right.
Which means you or your children or grandchildren will either submit to Islam or they're going to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the choice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they say they're going to do. That's what they've always done. And so, really it's just, do we want to wake up to that reality? And if you realize that that's the only choice, it's like, well, do you want to die or your children die or your grandchildren, or do you want to stop them? And if you want to stop them, you have to remove them from the country.
Yeah. No, it's
pretty simple in my mind.
It sounds like it's pretty simple. So when it comes to the stuff that you can do directly, because I know they're coming in and they have an unlimited amount of money. Like when they're coming in from all these other Islamic countries, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, I know that they're already funneling money in. And
well, they've been doing that for a long time. Remember the Holy Land Foundation trials here in the in DFW, 20 years ago. So I mean, this is a thing that they come here because it's easy. We've been very tolerant as a society.
Unfortunately,
we've allowed. We were sold this bill of goods that multiculturalism was good, the melting pot was good, but the reality is just very different. We now have the benefit of hindsight. We can say, actually, these people didn't come here and assimilate. They're coming here with a different purpose. And I'm not even talking about all the fraud. I mean, that's a completely different issue that we could talk about too. But when you look at like what they are doing here and what they've been doing, and the ability to tap into the biggest and best economy in the world and raise money and funnel money and some of it's to bring more people here, some of it's to fund terrorism around the world.
Yeah.
So all of these things are at play. But because of that, it's like, okay, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me get your perspective on this. You mentioned assimilate.
I knew I was going to go back to that.
The concept of assimilate, you knew it was, right?
I did.
No, I even mentioned it. Why are you saying that?
Go ahead.
It's just going to give me a hard time. Okay. Do you want to say what I'm going to say?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Just asking, Nick.
All right.
Sorry for the interruption. He sometimes does that. So the concept of assimilation is very strange to me. Like when I look around at the United States, and I mean, as a whole, you have all kinds of pockets of different cultures. You've got Little Italy, and you know about Little China, and then you've got the Irish, who definitely had their pockets back in the day. I think they're everything like you said is kind of melting together. But assimilation to me is a concept or a term that we use to make ourselves feel better about being the standard that everybody wants to come over here and emulate. But I don't think it's true. I don't think that assimilation actually exists. The idea of assimilation actually exists. I think it's really just rule of law. Like, do they come here and follow our laws or not? Is what's more important to me. So when you say assimilate, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think that look, we have throughout history have other groups of people have come to America at different times in our history, and sometimes when they get here, those new people cause problems, right? I mean, we saw this in the teens and 20s, and America decided for a while, well, we're actually going to stop immigration for a while, and there was like a 50-year moratorium where we hardly took any immigrants in, and then in the 60s they reversed that and decided we're going to start taking in a lot more immigrants, specifically with Hart-Celler Act. And that actually directed which immigrants we were going to prioritize. So no longer were we prioritizing kind of the English Western European immigrants who had previously come here, which by the way shared our Western civilization, our Western culture, and predominantly Christian. So those are the three big components of what assimilation, in my view, what it sort of requires. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody has to be a Christian, but our whole culture is founded on a Christian foundation, right? And it's a high trust, believe the best about people, I remember when I was a kid, just leaving the car unlocked when you went to the grocery store. I mean,
running.
Could you
leave
do
it
that?
running? Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's just, every kid in Midland, not every, but you drive through the parking lot of Midland High School and, half the pickup trucks had guns and
rifles
in the back window. And, they were going hunting. Like in September, they were going out in the country to go, dove hunting after school. I mean, it just was a totally different culture. It seems almost foreign when you think about that now. And so what's happened over really my lifetime is we've let in a bunch of people who don't view the world the same way we do. And, there's a whole, people argue the IQ component. I mean, I certainly think that plays a role because, the higher IQ people tend to, want to get along with their neighbors and, respect people's property and have these sort of cultural understandings that, people from some parts of the world just don't have. And when they come here, and you see it on Twitter all the time, import the third world, become the third world. I mean, there really is a difference between, cultures and the people of those cultures and what our culture, has grown out of through, coming from predominantly England, but, Western Europe, and having that Christian foundation. It's just a very different thing. Now, look, I am all for, my whole life I've said, I'm not racist. I don't have a problem against any immigrant from any country. And many of the immigrants I've known in my life have come and they have tried to assimilate. They have, brought their sort of Christian foundational belief system with them. It just seems like we have a growing population in the United States now of people who don't embrace that and, in fact, kind of reject that and are even hostile to it. And I think that's the problem that is really waking people up. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing, and you hear, oh, well, the Muslim population is only 1% of America. Like, what are they going to do? And I'm like, okay, well, it may be 1%, but there's plenty of towns where there are no Muslims there. And then you go to some places, here in DFW, and it's like half the city council is already, Muslim or whatever. Like, so they're congregating in areas where they can take power, which, by the way, is part of their plan. Again, they openly talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I know there's so many things we can talk about when it comes to the Islamification of Texas. Are there any specific patterns that you've already seen? You probably already talked about this on your channel, but when it comes to like specific things happening, like if we talk about Katy, Texas right now, there's a new Islamic center going up that's a lot like Epic City, and no one's looking at it. The Al-Huda Islamic Center of Katy, Texas. Yeah,
look, we're going to see lots of these. I mean, they're just going to keep trying. They're going to keep rebranding. They're not going to stop. That's the problem.
Sure. Yeah.
Whatever. Epic City has run into some hurdles, and people woke up to that, and we're going to continue seeing this effort across. And look, there's going to be some that are going to be huge, and they're going to get lots of headlines, and there's going to be other smaller ones. But the plan is still the same. It's to create I think a lot of people, when they think of Islam, they think of it like the way we think of a church. Some pastor has a passion for the Bible, wants to minister to his community and bring people to Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think the mosque is not that. It's actually kind of the opposite of that. It's really, you talk to anybody kind of in the intelligence community who's ever done anything overseas, where a lot of these, sort of jihadi type people are, it's really like a forward operating base. They provide training. They teach people how to, the whole concept of taqiyya, as you know, is they can lie about Islam as long as it furthers their cause for jihad. And so really it's just, we are allowing an enemy on our soil that is here. They, for a long time, I think kind of hid what they were trying to do, but now they openly talk about it. I mean, there's still plenty of people out there lying about what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
Mostly the mainstream media.
Yeah.
They cover for them pretty well.
Yeah.
And white liberal women, I think, also do that
too. Or white liberal trans women. I mean, they do the same thing.
Yes.
Which are actually men.
Yes.
But white liberal.
But if they're going to identify as a white liberal woman, they might as well identify with all of the horrible policies. Just embrace them all, right?
Just embrace them all.
They do, man.
Suicidal empathy, is that?
Oh my gosh!
Useful
idiots is what we call them. Yeah. So I want to, and you can tell me yay or nay on this, or you can say no comment. It's up to you. But I've kind of put a theory together. This is alleged, the theory. All right. So some information that I've gotten when it comes to these countries that are funding a lot of the developments and the mosque going up, because the mosques are not receiving taxpayer money until after they're built. Am I accurate in that assumption? Like they receive taxpayer money or some kind of benefit whenever they become a 501c3, but when it comes to the actual building of the building, they're not getting taxpayer money to do that. They're getting, loans or development loans. And what I've heard is that these Sharia compliant loans are getting from these Islamic countries, they can't charge interest because that's against the Quran. I think it's called riba, but it's also considered usury. So to get around that, their benefit is now these Islamic countries who are funding the building of these mosques and these developments, they own all those properties, which is kind of what you said. You didn't say it correlating to what I'm saying, but you said that these are forward operating bases for jihad, which wouldn't that correlate if these Islamic countries are funding this and they own these places?
Yeah, I think that's more that's not the cause of what's happening, but it is a result of what's happening. And so for sure they are. Look, the whole Islamic world wants to conquer the world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is their worldview. And so, and you could argue there are more moderate ones who don't openly advocate for that, but it's interesting that they don't seem to have a problem with the ones who are cutting people's heads off and blowing themselves up and things. So I think the joke is, what's the difference between a radical Muslim and a moderate Muslim? The radical Muslim wants to cut your head off. The moderate is just okay that he cuts your head off.
I didn't know that. That's good. I'm gonna steal that. That's great.
So I think it's all just part of it's all just components of the bigger picture, and that is what they're here to do. They say they're doing it, so I think it's time we listen.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear you say all of that. You're saying that you believe, as the railroad commissioner, that mosques are forward operating bases and that their objectives are which they've been practicing for 1,400 years, they're very honest and open about it, because it's easy to walk around and think that this is doom and gloom, and I'm the only one that's aware of this terrible problem, that terrorism is infiltrating our culture, and there's nothing I can do about it. But I mean, over the last a year ago, it was not my focus at all. I knew that Islam was bloody, and it was what I've always said is the worst idea in all of human history is Islam. It's the most violent, most bloody ideology probably ever known. I think Marxism is probably a close second, but Islam is. But here it is a year later.
They work together.
They work together. Yeah. Well, yeah, they have a lot in common, don't they? But here it is a year later, and I find it just occupying way more of my mental time than I should let it. Or, I mean, that may not be true, but more than it used to. And so it's good I'm beginning to understand that this sort of consciousness, this societal consciousness, is more than just me. It's our politicians, it's our leadership, it's our, it's every other podcast. It's, people are beginning to stand up and take notice of it.
To pile on what he's saying, like we were talking at the gym today, and I was like, Nick, are you excited about football season? And we both kind of sat there like, it's hard to be excited with what we know. You know what I mean? Like we're both diehard. I'm college football. He's pro football, and we're
love the football season.
College.
Always have.
Yep.
College team.
I'm a UT and TCU.
Oh gosh. Okay, so SEC.
Well, I went to both. So.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, I'm a Sooner fan. Sorry.
It's okay. I've just had dinner with one of my business partners and his family, and his son's going to be a junior at OU. So yeah, he's
okay. No, yeah,
it's a good school.
You went to UT and TCU.
I did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I started at UT, and after a couple of years realized that I probably was never going to graduate if I stayed there. And it was so ridiculously liberal. And I really wasn't thinking about it, but I came up to visit, actually my now business partner came up to visit him one weekend. He was at TCU, and it was like after one weekend, I was like, this is so much better.
Really? So TCU is more of a conservative?
Well, it certainly was then.
Okay.
And well, it really was just more, Fort Worth was more conservative than
just the city.
Like Austin was just crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Austin is still crazy.
It's
liberal.
back in the 90s, too. Late 80s, early 90s?
Early 90s, yeah.
Wow, they've been liberal that long. My gosh.
When I started at UT, they still had the apartheid shanty on West Campus where they were like protesting, because they had been protesting about apartheid in South Africa.
In South Africa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Every day walking to class, they had some kind of different protest that you walked through. So they were like radical lefties protesting stuff every single day.
Unbelievable.
Dang, that was
Why
back
do
in
you
the
think
80s.
that is? Do you think it's just something about being young and stupid and inexperienced that people just lean left? So
You're gonna make me open up this can, huh?
Yes.
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 My working theory is that it starts with a hatred of God and a rejection of God and the creation that He's made in you. And in order to fulfill that, you also have to hate yourself. And I think if you look at most leftists and you look at it through that lens, you'll realize that they actually just hate themselves. And so because they hate themselves, they then have to hate everything else.
That is a great take.
wow, that
is a really good take. I love how you started that. Like it starts with a hatred of God.
Yeah.
Like
So how do you convince someone in a conversation like that, in a conversation like the one we had here last week? Was it last week? No,
I don't
week
know if
before
you saw
last.
that. We had a debate with a trans activist.
A trans activist. How do you
and
convince?
a minister?
Yeah, how would you convince someone like that they really don't hate anybody in the world? It's themselves that they hate, and that's where it starts.
Yeah, I don't think you can make anybody see that. I think, just as Christians, we're called to love people and lead by example. And ideally they see that in you and they're like, there's something about that I want.
Yeah. So there's no like catharsis that they're going to have. No like acute download. You hate yourself.
Well, I mean, look, a lot of these people will eventually hit some kind of rock bottom. And sometimes when you're at rock bottom, there's only one way to go, and that's to look up.
So,
Yeah. We've seen that. There's been evidence of that, especially with whenever Charlie Kirk was traveling around. Sometimes he would travel with detransitioning trans people, and they would give their account of, I was an idiot. Like there was, and now my body is permanently damaged.
Yeah.
I can't come back from this. And so I like it whenever he would do that because we can talk about it all day. But coming from someone who used to be in that community, it's kind of like whenever people call me a racist. I can say I'm not racist all day, but until I actually have people on, that are different colors, and we've had people on. We had an ex-football player, ex-NFL player on. His name is Mark Clayton. Played for the Sooners in the 2000 national title team. Played under Jason White. He star receiver. And that dude is as conservative can be.
Loves God,
loves the Lord.
Love
And the way he gave us account of, it's always by God's grace that we can do these things. And he gave us an account of like being in the locker room with his teammates and everything. Man, and I'm like, what? And I'm racist?
Yeah.
Like, like,
exactly.
okay.
Look, the left doesn't care about racism. Let's don't delude ourselves and think that they care about racism. I mean, look at the protests that were, happening this week with the Carmelo Anthony.
Oh, dude, I posted about that today.
Yeah. I mean, like literally it is the most racist reaction I've ever seen.
Bro.
And, the left is silent on that, of course. These are all leftists being as racist as possible.
Yeah.
So racist is just, like all things from the left, I would argue, they just projecting what they actually do onto you because they know they can use it as a cudgel.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. In fact, I've said it before on this very podcast. They don't hate racism. They don't hate pro-life. They don't hate, people who want a border. They don't hate these things. They hate, like you said, they hate Jesus and God and Christian values and Christianity and Christians. That's what they hate. And they put all that hate onto white people because we're the predominant, demograph, and they everything else they're just using as a cudgel,
totally,
to hate white people basically and Christians.
Wasn't in history? Can't we actually make the argument that there were more white slaves?
Oh yeah, I mean,
the Muslim slave trade enslaved more whites than just about everybody.
I love that he tied that into Muslims.
The Muslims. Yeah, it's
Well,
true
they were
though.
it.
It's true.
Yeah, I know. I'm just glad you thought of that.
And they're still doing it, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I was just about to say, and it's gone on for much longer.
Right.
It's still going on.
Is there any evidence that they're doing that here?
Well, I mean, this gets into like the whole, border crisis and all the illegal aliens and the whole underworld that has created. I mean, where did the 500,000 kids go?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are, some theories.
By the way,
but
the
none
FBI
of them
Dallas,
have happy endings.
Yeah, the FBI
really
in Dallas
disgusting.
just found like 89 kids.
Yeah.
So I just saw that. That was on Friday. FBI Dallas found 89 kids that
I think,
needed to be rescued.
I think in America, we have this view of slavery because we've all had, all the TV shows and movies and everything that we've all watched all of our lives, portrayed it this certain way here in America. And no doubt that there was a lot of it that was horrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think in our minds, whenever we hear the word slavery, that is what we think of. And we don't think of all the other ways that people could also be slaves.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other just horrific slavery going on around the world, and some of it here in this country too.
Would you say, because I feel like you've done a lot of research and you have a lot of knowledge on Islam, would you say Islam is also the biggest, we know that U.S. is like the number one customer for like human and sex trafficking, like because we had Tammy Brown on here on our last episode or episode before last, and she gave us a lot of statistics that pointed to that. Would the second one be just Islam in general, like when it comes to sex trafficking?
Well, I think if you look at just their view of people who are not Muslim and, the way they view them, I don't have the facts to back that up, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case.
Okay. Yeah. It just kind of is in the back of my mind of there's probably numbers there that we don't know and we can't quantify just because they're doing it without it being on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, we can't even quantify it, what's happening in our own country.
Yeah,
It's just all of the fraud and everything going on, and we can't even wrap our arms around that here. So what's happening in these like legitimate third world countries where people don't even have
barely have
documentation
access.
or anything,
Yeah.
right?
So can you give us your most ludicrous account when it comes to dealing with Islam in Texas so far?
Yeah, well, the craziest one was I had initially during the campaign, I was going to go down to Houston to an event that someone had sold me was like a Republican event. And, I was trying to get everywhere I could for the campaign. And it was the morning of, someone on my security team was like, you realize where this is? And I was like, no, I haven't even looked at it. It was literally like in an Islamic center in Houston.
No.
And they're like, yeah, we're not letting you go there.
Smart move. Smart move.
This was your security, head security guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Doing his job.
I've been in the part of my, yes, I am running for this office and everything, but I'm a business guy. I'm not really a politician. If you haven't noticed, I don't really talk like a lot of politicians.
Sure. Yeah. Thank God.
You are very polished. I wouldn't say like a politician, but I mean, I would say like a business guy.
Well, I guess that's a compliment, but
no, that is a compliment.
Part of my part of my business history is I've actually owned security businesses in the Middle East, and so a lot of what my professional career has been aside from I've done a lot of different things, but one component of that has been really combating radical jihadis in the Middle East.
So did you contract with the military or
we had some military contracts. Most of them were commercial contracts, corporates.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What countries?
Iraq. That's where we started. I was also involved in when Eric Prince sold Blackwater. I was involved in that transaction and was an owner at one point in time. I sold out of that. What was that? 2012 or something like that. And then we had this opportunity to buy this like smaller boutique security business that was operating in Iraq, started by some former British Special Forces guys, and but they had their Rolodex was unbelievable. Like their client list was, all the biggest and sort of, like Fortune 500 companies.
Wow.
And so we're like, well, this is an interesting deal. And so we bought that company, and then we took their Rolodex and went to a lot of these their clients and said, okay, where else are you operating that you need security? And, there were other places in Northern Africa and, other parts of the world that are also as, not very friendly. Mm-hmm. And so we started expanding out, and we were in the process of that. So we bought that company in, 2012. And then in 2015, we were approached by another larger company that loved what we were doing, and they wanted to just team up with us. And at one point in time in the conversation, sort of negotiating what that teaming agreement was going to look like. And they were like, actually, how much would it cost to just buy you?
Oh.
And so, we just like threw out a number that we thought was kind of absurd, and we closed in 90 days.
Wow.
So we're like, oh yeah.
That's great. So you were there, like you were.
Were you over there, doing the security itself?
No. I'm a business guy. We hired, former special forces guys and people who like, real experience.
Yeah.
I'm just I am a gun nut and do a lot of things in the gun industry also, but not a former operator in any sense.
Okay, so you're not ex-military in any way? Okay, that was going to be my question because it sounded like you had a lot of knowledge in that area. I'm like, dude, he sounds like he's former military.
Yeah.
So
I did. We did some stuff. We worked with the government on a few projects. So I did have a top secret clearance at one point in time.
Okay.
It's long expired. But worked with a lot of people who have done the tip of the spear type stuff.
Okay.
And so I feel like I know maybe more than the average person about it, but I'm by no means, an expert on that.
When it comes to having top clearance like that, when you have that top clearance and you're given stuff that is, classified, when you don't have that clearance anymore, I'm guessing you can't talk about that, even though you had clearance to see it then, you still can't talk about it.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. That was my question. Cause I'm pretty sure that even though you had top clearance then, you have the knowledge, you probably signed like the most robust NDA.
Well, I think, there's like a law. You can't divulge classified information, whether you have the clearance or not. So
I did not know that. That's good to know.
Yeah.
We've seen some people get away with that though, right? And it seems like some people don't get prosecuted, and some people do.
Trial of the century kind of stuff you talking about?
So, President Trump, they raided Mar-a-Lago. Remember, claiming he had all this,
I was wanting to make sure that you were talking about what we were thinking.
Yeah. So it is pretty crazy how they don't necessarily. Like a lot of things, they don't always equally apply the law, but that is not something I would risk.
Well, we had Jeremy Hutchinson on, and he was given a Trump pardon because he was, in our opinion and in his, and now a judge said acquitted. He was not just innocent. They said that was an absurd interpretation of the law.
Yeah.
But it was under the Biden administration, and they put him in jail for a little under 2 years. And then when Trump got it back into office,
he'd still be in prison if Trump hadn't pardoned him.
Yeah.
It's pretty
there
crazy.
There are a lot of people that would still be in prison after January 6th.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I didn't even think about that. Do you think this might be a controversial question? Do you think anybody do they deserve to still be in prison that had any kind of dealings with January 6th that did go to prison?
That's a good question. I haven't looked at every case. There are hundreds of them, right?
There was a lot,
1,000 of them, or whatever the number was. I mean, obviously, I don't know. I mean, I have met a few people who were imprisoned because they literally were just
there.
A group of people went in. The police were like, "Come on in," and then they got arrested. So, there were people on video, and I think what really twists people up on this issue is because there is video of people committing acts of violence and destruction, right? Yeah. And obviously I'm not for that.
Right.
But then the question is, well, how many of those people were, being incited by some, Fed that was there undercover?
Yeah.
Like literally because they planned all that ahead of time.
Absolutely.
We know that now that this was all, it was essentially a setup. Mm-hmm. And so,
I don't believe anybody because it was such a blanketed thing. I think Trump did the right thing with giving a blanket.
Yeah, I do too.
I do too. Besides, even if you take the worst case of someone slamming offices with a wooden bench and smashing windows, they don't deserve 17 years in prison or whatever it was. What was it? 17 years.
How many people? How many people can you commit all these horrific crimes? Even here in Texas, I was reading something this morning about some career criminal down in Austin who, they just let off after like his 30th, felony.
What?
Oh yeah, it's just
happens
same kind
all
of
the
thing.
time.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
That's crazy. So, as railroad commissioner, Texas railroad commissioner. Aside from any special circumstances that might come up, do you expect to have any direct interface with the great and wonderful Donald Trump?
Well, I met Donald Trump in 1991.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
This is before he was.
I mean, like I read his book when I was in college.
That's when he was a Democrat.
And well, I mean, he wasn't really anything.
Yeah,
he really was just like a business guy.
He's
in
just a
New York
billionaire
trying to get stuff done.
Right.
And
a lot like you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And well, not exactly. His pocketbook's a little bit. But he. It's. I mean, long story about how I met him is not relevant to this, but he is. I would argue the best president of my lifetime, no question.
Yeah.
For a long time, I thought it was Ronald Reagan.
Absolutely.
And I think there were a lot of great things about
We've
Reagan.
been blessed with two really good presidents in our lifetime.
With hindsight, you can look back and be like, oh, well, that one thing he did or that other thing he did was terrible. And that's certainly the case also. But man, talk about because I lived through the 70s, you too, I guess, lived
I was
through
born
the
in
70s.
74.
And I sort of remember, just how, kind of the malaise that was on the country and the attitude that people had. And then just how that was so, revitalized in the 80s. And then, of course, I was in high school in the 80s. And, there's nothing more radicalizing than you take like these, Zoomers now and, they see a video of like some, high school party or something from 1985. And they're like, that just doesn't even look like our world.
Yeah,
it does.
Like totally, like it was
doesn't.
a foreign country.
I want to go back.
Yeah.
Oh God, I
I want to go back. So
we had it really good,
We did. I had this
Played
conversation
outside.
all the time. Yeah, it was great. Drank out of water hose and
Mom was
rode
even saying
bikes
it, like,
without
you
helmets.
can't even like walk home from school anymore.
Yeah.
That's how bad it's gotten. But,
I know. When I was a kid, I rode my bike to school.
Yeah.
It only got stolen once. I mean,
and it wasn't that big of a deal. Like
it had the big
another
banana
bike.
seat, and so whatever. Yeah, nowadays they just get offended too easy. I think that's what all of our kids have been taught to have some sort of. I hate the word mental sickness because it's just so overused. But they're cutting themselves, and they're having to go see psychologists and therapists and stuff. That never happened when we were kids.
No, it didn't. And I attribute that to like, I talk to my kids. I have 4 kids. So I talk about it with them all the time. It's like, I wish I could give you what I had because it really was, I'd get home from school or whatever. And if, probably didn't have homework or if I'd finished my homework, I'd go down the street to my friend's house and, I might be there for an hour. I might go to another friend's house and, my parents had no idea where I was. Yeah. Zero. There was no cell phone. There was no tracking, no GPS.
There's nothing to be afraid of.
It was like, when it was dinner time, mom was like on the phone calling, Mrs. So-and-so down the street.
Yeah.
Is Bo still there? No, oh, they went to so-and-so. And then she'd hang up and she'd call that house, be like, hey, could you tell Bo he's got to come home for dinner? I mean, like, it was just a totally different world.
Whichever friend had access to their parents' rated R Betamax collection, that's where you go. I mean, and you'd watch the rated R movies.
let me give you guys this account because we're in this space. So I grew up in the 90s. You guys grew up in the 80s. But when it comes to my high school, I was literally the only one that had a cell phone, and it was a brick. It didn't even have voicemail. So it was just a brick, and I was probably the only one in my high school of 350 kids that had a cell phone. I was talking to his boss's daughter who was in the gym. He works for a gym, and she's just a little extrovert. She comes up and we're both Sooner fans. She was talking about OU softball,
high school kid.
Yeah, she's a high school kid, and she's always on her phone. Always on her smartphone. And I was having this conversation with her, and I was just telling her that I was the only one in high school that had a cell phone and it didn't have voicemail. And her one question to me was, "What'd you guys do in class?" And I was like, "We learned, like the teacher taught." We wrote down notes and we learned. That's what we did.
But also occasionally like passed a note to your buddy.
I mean,
yeah.
And then she was like, "Oh man, I just watch reels." And I was like, "What?
Yeah.
Like, are you serious?" And so it was just, I have found myself I'm stepping into like the role that you've probably known for a while of now I miss the olden days.
Yeah.
I finally stepped into that.
Well,
role, so I've made
I
it,
remember
guys. I've made it.
The first time I detected the change coming, I was driving around the neighborhood that I grew up in because my mom still lived there. But I was on my way to work, and it was early in the morning, and I stopped by the same bus stop that I used to wait for the bus to come pick me up. And when I would wait for the bus to come pick me up, it was me and probably 8 of my friends or 6 of my friends. And we'd get there and we'd talk about, Back to the Future or whatever it was. We'd compare, our denim jackets, that kind of thing. And at this bus stop, at this 4-way stop, there was a kid on each corner of the intersection. And all 4 of them had earbuds and they were looking at their phones.
Oh,
and I thought immediately, oh, man, the times have changed so much that we're not interfacing with each other anymore.
Well, and so just back to your point a minute ago about kids, harming and all that. It's this isolation and then this just being brainwashed by, what the algorithm, right? And most of those algorithms targeted kids are terrible.
Yeah.
It's why we saw such a ballooning in the whole LGBTQI, WTF, whatever all the letters are now.
Yep.
We just say alphabet community.
Yeah, and the self-harm stuff and like a lot of that's just driven because the parents are checked out. Actually, when I first had kids, it was a real temptation. Like, oh, you mean you can just put this iPad down in front of your toddler and they're not going to bother you and you can be selfish with your time. And very quickly I was like, man, that is terrible.
Yeah.
When I sort of woke up to like, what am I doing? Like, this is like this, you have to have interaction. You have to communicate with people.
Yeah.
And so, I think because of that, I think a lot of people are also just in a lot of ways, emotionally, especially maturing at a much slower rate because they're so buried in electronics that they're not getting, the communication skills, the relational skills, even just, I talk a lot with my kids. My oldest son is amazing and awesome and brilliant, but he's my oldest son. So of course we butt heads every now and then.
Sure.
And, I'm like, listen, like this, your relationship with me is no different than a relationship you're going to have with a spouse or whatever. Like you have to be able to work through problems. You have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to forgive other people. Like I make mistakes, I'm a dad. Of course I'm going to make a mistake every now and then. And, but I'm going to come to you and I'm going to seek forgiveness for that.
Yeah.
And, but when you make a mistake, you've got to learn how to do that same thing. You've got to be able to own it. And all this is like the human relation side of it.
Humility.
That you have to have. And I just feel like kids are not getting that as much today.
Oh, absolutely not.
I heard a statistic the other day that this new generation is the first generation that is actually less intelligent than the previous generation because the intelligence has actually gone up each generation. And this new generation is the first one, and they accredit it to too much screen time.
Which is shocking because you ever seen those like posts where they're like, this was the 8th grade test from, liberal Kansas in, 1890. And you're like, I'm not sure I could pass this.
Yes.
These kids were geniuses.
Yeah, where they're talking about the argot of ancient Greek literature and who did what. And yeah.
So, really, I think and of course, a lot of that is, if your kid's in a public school, then it's definitely woke. But even, like a lot of private schools are woke also. And it's like, what are you studying? And it's like, oh, I'm studying, West African history. I was like, what?
Well, why?
Have you studied American history or Texas history or, anything relevant to, our world here? And, without that foundation, and all that's intentional, by the way, that, they don't want our kids to know about our history because then you can tell them about our history. You can tell them what it was, which is why so many people just have a wrong view of what America is.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I have a family member who's in high school who I'm pretty close with. I have a good relationship with her. She's my niece. And she was telling me about the American history that they were learning, about how the colonists and the Tea Party and why everything started between the 13 colonies and the British monarchy. And she said that once we stopped paying taxes and they came to collect their taxes, we would treat the tax collectors really badly. Like we would tar them and feather them and torture them. And I'm like, so the impression that I was under was that not only are they teaching us about West African history, the American history that they do teach our children today puts us on the aggressor side,
right? The
bad side. And so I don't like that.
No, of course not. But that's, this goes back to, the sort of the communist playbook back in the 50s, and they talked about how they were, how
I've
they were
seen
going
that,
to eventually, take over America. And it started with education. It all started there.
And I think they also started with the home. Like it was one of the like top 50 things that they wanted to do to implement their agenda. That was an astounding list. We could do a whole episode just reading off this list.
Oh, we should do that.
We should.
Yeah, that'd
Absolutely.
be interesting.
So what are you doing next Tuesday, Bo? So speaking of that, Texas Railroad Commissioner, do you have a plan for the first 100 days?
Yeah, so we really haven't talked about the position. Really.
No, we haven't, have we?
I mean, I have to get through a general election in November.
Okay.
And
So you won your primary.
You won your
I won the
primary.
primary.
Okay.
But we're
As the underdog.
the total underdog, and outspent 4 or 5 to 1, and had even the even the whole establishment against me, and still did it. And
Congratulations,
I think it's because there is a desire among voters to have people who they know are going to do what they say. A lot of times in politics, people make a lot of promises on the campaign trail, and then they get into office and they disappoint.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not so much in the Democrat Party, because they're all communists. We know that.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
So they all toe the party line. But within the Republican Party, we have diversity of thought, and so I think a lot of voters expect, if you're running as a Republican, they expect you to be a conservative. And all too often there are people who run as Republicans that are not very conservative. And so when they get in office, they start thinking about their reelection, and what donors do I need at court. And, is this going to upset this group or that group? And, so they sort of like don't stand for the things that the voter expects them to stand for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I just made the commitment a long time ago when when I was elected to Tarrant County party chair, I just said, I'm going to use this opportunity to be the person in office that I've always wanted my elected officials to be. And that's just do the right thing, say what I mean, and actually fight for our party platform.
Yeah.
And be unapologetic about that. And that sort of coincided with, the resurgence of, Donald Trump wanting to run for 2023. So, wanting to run again. And, in my view, he really showed the way that you can be sort of this unapologetic America First warrior. And of course you're going to get criticized and they're going to hate you.
Yeah.
The bad people are going to hate you, but Americans are going to love you because you're fighting for them. And
Absolutely.
So that's kind of just how I viewed, what I'm doing here in Texas. And I know that I have all the confidence in the world that the reason I won this election is because I just connected with people, because I have a track record. They know that I am not going to back down, on these things. And, you were asking about the Railroad Commission earlier, and I still don't feel I've answered any of your questions about that. So let me just give me a minute here.
Go right ahead.
Because there's all these other topics that are really fun to talk about.
Yeah, let me get my popcorn.
The regulatory position is probably less fun to talk about, but let me just touch on it. So if anyone's watching this, they'll know. Look, the oil and gas industry is our largest and most important industry in Texas. And there has been it's a 3-person commission.
Okay.
So you're elected to a 6-year term. And so they're rotating terms. So one commissioner is up every 2 years. And so I, ran against the incumbent who was elected in 2020. And I've never met the guy, actually. I hear he's a really nice guy. And in fact, I'm supposed to meet him here in a couple of weeks, and I'll look forward to that.
Oh, good.
I am just of the view that everybody who I want in office are people who are going to go fight for the things that actually matter for Texans.
Yeah.
And I think that what has happened when you have a government agency, what happens? The bureaucracy sort of continues to grow and gain in power. And there was this tipping point, not exactly sure when it was, where the Railroad Commission was sort of seen as like this big advocate for the industry and, to push back on the federal government and the EPA and everything and really protect our industry here. And then last year, the commission proposed this new set of sort of environmental rules that I would argue kind of mimic a lot of what, the Biden EPA wanted to do anyway. And so they imposed these new rules on the industry which of course the long-term effect of that is it's going to hurt the industry.
Yeah.
It's going to cost jobs. It's going to raise the break-even point for oil, which means you have to have a higher oil price, which means higher prices at the pump.
Yep. Yeah.
And so
Which we're
all of these things are bad, right? And so I just, with those rules went into place in July. And that's kind of when I was like, I actually have a background. I've done business in the oil and gas industry, and I'm fourth generation in the oil business. In fact, my father, both my grandfathers, my great grandfather were all in the oil business, and so I was like, this is a position that I could go actually make a big difference for the state of Texas.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, a lot of people want to make it something else, right? Oh, you're just doing this as a stepping stone to that or whatever. Well, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the future is going to be, but I know that I'm just looking at this one day at a time, just like I did when I was the county chairman. I didn't view that as like a stepping stone to anything. I viewed that as an opportunity to take the largest red county in the country that had been drifting more and more left and ensure that Donald Trump won Tarrant County, because Tarrant County is the largest red county, but in 2018, when Beto O'Rourke was at the top of the ticket, Tarrant County voted for Beto O'Rourke over Ted Cruz, and in 2020 voted for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. And so I thought, yeah, well, I mean, that's another topic we can talk about too. Which, by the way, I'm a big, we need to have precinct voting, get rid of countywide voting. We need to have paper ballots. Be able to audit the elections, in the precincts.
I agree. Can I ask you a clarifying question just about the oil and gas industry? My mom is also in the oil, like she earns royalties because of what my grandfather set up, and so I have this like just confusion of like, why are our gas prices so high since Donald Trump is now drilling locally, but yet the gas prices are still high because we're in war with Iran. So why is that? Can you explain that to me?
I mean, look, that's a question I get a lot, and it's like, I thought we were energy independent, and theoretically we are, in that we do produce more than we can use. So that's a good thing. But the reality is, oil is a global commodity, and we would have to separate our entire economy from the global economy in order to have a price. I mean, like Chevron or Exxon or these big oil companies. If they produced oil here, they would have to sell it. So the argument would be, well, they could just sell it cheaper here. Okay, well, I don't know what shareholder of those companies would want them to do that, right? Like, we live in a global economy, right? And so that's just never going to happen. But here there are things we can do to lower price. Obviously, I mean, the big thing right now is the president hopefully will bring an end to this situation in Iran sooner rather than later, and when he does, that will ensure the free flow of 20% of the oil in the world goes through that strait. Yeah. And so once they ensure that Iran can't hold that strait hostage or threaten this or threaten that, that will make a big difference. I think it's also why he black bagged Maduro in the middle of the night down in Venezuela. Venezuela, the largest oil reserves in the world. Yeah. Iran actually has the third largest oil reserves in the world.
Well, I
didn't know that.
Who I think he's got his eye on is China.
Well,
right? Because China is in bed with, whether that's the right term or not, they're dependent so much on Maduro.
Both of those countries were selling China oil at a discount.
Then to us? So they were selling it to us at a premium.
They were selling, both of those countries were supplying oil to China at a discount. So in a way, if you think of it in China terms, what Donald Trump has done is ensure that probably our most significant geopolitical enemy in the world is no longer getting discounted oil. So in a way, he's like defunded them in a way. So it's
something I would have never known unless talking to you. Like, that's awesome.
It's super interesting and not something that a lot of people think about or care about. Frankly, but in Texas, we have to ensure that we are producing as much oil as we can. I'm a rancher also. I'm a landowner. I have a ranch right in the middle of an oil field in West Texas. So I'm not like for just bulldozing the land and killing the environment either. I think there has to be a balance. We're called to be stewards, and so there is a way to do it. But I think there's a way to do it more responsibly and not just put all these sort of Green New Deal leftist bureaucrat wet dreams, on our industry. And so that's what I'm going to do. That's the main thing I want to do is go back in and redo those rules that they put in place last year, because long term they are going to hurt Texas. They're going to hurt jobs. There's nearly 2 million people in Texas that their job is dependent on the oil and gas industry. There's about 500,000 directly in the industry, and another 1.5 million, in related industries. And so, it's a huge deal for Texas. Huge deal.
So how do you look at the EPA? Like,
you mean as the enemy?
Okay, is that the answer? I mean, I was going to say, are you pro EPA or I don't know the ins and outs of the oil and gas and energy industry, so I don't know. I just know the EPA is sort of the fist that governs everything or determines everything.
Look, the problem is that radical leftists, they infiltrate all of these big institutions, right?
Sure.
Big government agencies.
Oh yeah.
And so, they use those agencies to, it doesn't matter what the laws are. They just come in and start and write all these rules that are harmful to business, harmful to people, because they have this, Green New Deal, far left agenda. And it doesn't matter if that's good for America, bad for America, good for people, bad for people. It's just whatever their agenda is, which is, by the way, how most of their policies are. And so
it doesn't make any sense. Like, why are they doing these kind of policies that are just bad for everyone? Like, it literally is just a plot to destroy America. So, like, but the question is why? I
would argue that leftism is sort of anti-human anyway. Right? I mean, if you look at their policies, I mean, like what is abortion? It's we killed 60 whatever million babies in this country.
1/3 of Gen Z
is already gone. Yeah.
So I don't pretend to understand the why. I just look at the result.
Okay.
And there's no question that when you have these bureaucrats just sort of run unchecked, that bad things happen.
Yeah.
And also there's just a consolidation of power. And America was really founded by people who believed in this notion of rugged individualism and and liberty. And those things meant something for a long time.
Oh yeah.
And now you have to have a license from the state to cut somebody's hair.
It doesn't make any sense.
So it's just we've gone way too far on on a lot of these issues. And so I think part of being a strong commissioner in an agency like the Railroad Commission is being able to push back when bureaucrats are going too far on things and keeping them in check. Look, I'm sure there's like 1,000 people in the Railroad Commission. I'm sure there's some good people there. So it's not, I'm not saying that everyone who works there is bad. Of course not. But there's no question that the result of what they produced last year is going to be bad for our industry. Under the guise of, we're protecting the environment. And I think, like I said, I think there's a way to right size regulations so that you can do both, right? I mean, this is the left always says, the Republicans, they're not for clean air or clean water. I mean, that's ridiculous. Who doesn't want clean air and clean water? I mean, that's an insane argument.
And everything that they would do to get clean air, clean water would actually make the air and the water worse.
Yeah.
Like it makes zero sense. So which, the liberals are, to me, a walking contradiction.
Always.
And it doesn't make any sense to me, which is why I always ask the question, like, you're just making things bad. Like, are you doing this on purpose or are you just that stupid? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
No, I tell them, hurry up and eat your own tail, man. Please hurry up. Eat that sucker.
Let me ask you a question, because you said that there's a lot of bureaucrats that, need to be kept in check, and that's something you're going to do. When people come into power, especially as a high position as what you're about to embark on, what are the things in place that will keep you accountable?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's an elected position, so that's
right.
Unlike a lot of unlike bureaucrats and a lot of these agencies that we have even here in Texas, the people who run those agencies are appointed, so they're not accountable to the people.
Yeah.
So being elected is the first way you're accountable. And then look, I'm one of 3 commissioners, so I have to be able to work well with the other commissioners, and fortunately I know them really well. Actually, one of them is Christy Craddock. She grew up in Midland. She and I she'll probably get mad at me for saying this. We're the same age. We grew up together. And
so you're what, 30? You're 30?
Yeah, exactly. born in '69.
There you go.
But so I've known her all my life.
Okay.
Old family friends, and then the other commissioner is Wayne Christian. He's a super nice guy, and I've talked to both of them since the election win, and excited to work with both of them. And look, they both have some good ideas, and I have some good ideas, and so we're going to work together to make our industry stronger.
I just know that whenever you're that high of an official, and we had some other political positions that were on here, and one of my exhortations to them is you will be tested. If you win, you will be tested. Like you're a follower of Christ, you love Jesus. It sounds like you have all of the right intentions that I would vote. By the way, I did vote for you.
Great.
But you have all the intentions that I would vote for. Like you have everything that I would look at and be like, yes, I'm voting for this guy. I can see it in his online presence. I can see it as I'm sitting next to you. But it doesn't mean you won't be tempted. It doesn't mean that power will come and you won't be tempted to do something that you shouldn't do. So I guess my same exhortation to you is that you're going to have to stay rooted in the Word. You're going to have to stay humble and know that those temptations are going to come.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, that's, look, I've been, because I've, had some success in business in my life. I mean, none of this is new to me.
Good.
And so
I like that better than the last one.
Yeah. So, I think that's just, when you exactly stay rooted in the Word. Yeah. I mean, that is the most important thing. And by the way, I'm just, to show some humility here. That is something I struggle with. I try to read the Bible every day, and every now and then I'll look up and I'm like, man, it's been 3 days since I read anything in the Bible. It's like, what am I doing?
That you would even admit that. Yeah. It shows your humility.
Yeah. So. Well, but look, I mean, if you, as a Christian, that's kind of the first place you have to get is that we are all imperfect.
Completely agree.
And if not for him, we'd really be screwed. So
absolutely, dude. That's. Yeah. I mean, I love the positions you're running on, and I really do, and I've talked to other people that you're connected to, Scott from Patriot Mobile. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and me and him had kind of a private conversation, but even though you're not eyes on, it sounds like you'd make a great governor. I'm just saying. I mean, throwing that out there.
I mean, let's first of all, we're not going to have that choice for 4 more years, right? I mean, I think Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. I think they're not up for re-election until 2030 or so. I mean, that's so far in the future, I can't even.
Oh no, this is an election year for him. So there's people running against him, but
you're going to be 6 years as railroad commissioner too.
Yeah,
right.
So I mean,
I'm just saying, man, I'm tickling your ear right now. If it keeps going this way, and you keep doing everything that you say you're going to do. Yeah, I have a feeling that's going to be next on the list.
Well, look, if I do everything that I say that I'm going to do, then and there's a groundswell for that, then that's a conversation at that time. But that's not like
that's not what you're thinking.
That's
about
not my
right
plan
now.
Or anything like that. I think that's when people get into this. When people get into this world, I think a lot of them have this idea that that's what they're going to do. And my plan is, this is my opportunity to do something that I think is really good for Texas. Yeah. And by the way, not just in the confines of the regulatory agency, I'll be a statewide, if I win in November, I'll be a statewide elected official. With that comes a lot of responsibility. Yeah. And but also a giant platform, to work with the legislature, to work with the governor. Yeah. I'll be able to, there's this thing that really matters to people who voted for me, and this is what I want to come talk to you about. Yeah. And I could probably call him, a year ago, and wouldn't have been able to get that meeting. But as a statewide, those opportunities will present themselves, and so I hope that I can use this platform for good.
I think you will. Can I give you a couple? Hang on, Nick. Can I give you a couple things to ask him once you do get into office?
Sure.
Okay, so one, I want to know why he said on video that Texas always is a place for the Indian people to come, because the whole H-1B visa thing going on. And two, why did he allow all the mosques to come up? Does he have any kind of
ask him that.
I think that there are a lot of people we could point to and blame for the state of our country, and I don't really think it's fair to put that on any one person.
Okay.
Because I think just as a culture, our entire culture has allowed this to happen, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we were talking about that at the beginning, right? We were all raised to think that, we were a melting pot and anybody could come here, and that's the American dream. Anybody can come here and do anything. And yeah, sure, every now and then you get someone like, or once in our lifetime, you get someone like Elon Musk, who came here and has done amazing things. But we also have a lot of people who come here and scam the system. And again, I don't think that people were even awake to this, just even a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I guess it really accelerated under the Biden administration because
it did.
Because of his, during his administration, they allowed, estimates are north of 20 million people to come into the country illegally.
Gracious. Wow.
And so, when you suddenly inject that many new people, of course, where do they go? They go to where their cousins already living or whatever. So these like little pockets that were maybe smaller and sort of off the radar, now suddenly there's all these new people there and they're bigger communities. And now, so when someone goes to their normal grocery store, instead of seeing, the one person there that was, from India or whatever, now they go there and they're the only person there not from India.
Yeah.
And it's like, what the heck?
So many DMs are coming into my DMs, like from people who live in those areas. Like, you have no idea. Like, I just did one video on Leander and Cedar Park, Texas, which is near the Austin area. And I did that one video and I got an influx of people saying, you have no idea, but you are absolutely right.
Yeah. I've went and spoken Leander a couple times in the campaign. And I mean, that was like the number one issue for them was the H-1B issue. And I think it's because it's, it's part of the Austin sort of tech
IT
spillover. Yeah. And so, that seems to be a place where they're congregating also. And so, the people who have always lived there are like, things are really changing and we don't like the change.
Yeah. I will say this, when it comes to the H-1B visa fraud or the Islamification of Texas, I would say screw the H-1B visa, take care of the Islamification of Texas if I had to choose, because, the Indians are here. They don't want to kill us. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I agree. Like
Islam does.
There is a violent and jihad component to the Islam side of the equation. But I'm also of the opinion it's like we can multitask.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
all right. I like
I don't think, in fact, some guy DM me today and he's like, you need to stop talking about the H-1Bs and just focus on Islam. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, I think I was the first elected official in Texas to start talking about Islam, and now everybody's talking about it. So that's a good thing. And I was pointing out, some H-1B stuff, I don't know, maybe like a year ago.
Yeah.
And now everyone's talking about it. And so I think it's important to talk about all of these things. I mean, I think it's our responsibility to not just focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And look, a lot of these things are related, right? The same failed policies that allowed, all these Muslims to come here and start doing what they're doing and acting their jihad are the same policies that have allowed, however many of these people from India who are submitting applications for these H-1B visas and, they're putting in 10 applications for the same person until they get accepted. And then it turns out they have fake college degrees or fake medical degrees or whatever. And it's like, how many doctors actually didn't graduate from medical school? And so, I don't know, there's suddenly you start looking at all these things and all the fraud that goes along with it. And so I'm just of the opinion, like we have to tackle it all.
Yeah. I just actually had this conversation with a friend of the podcast, Jen McRafoon.
Oh yeah. She's running
who I would very much like to see get on the ballot. So let's put her on the ballot, Texas. It is of very popular opinion that we're being attacked on multiple sides. And you have podcasts like us, we seem to focus on side A. But then you've got podcasts that we are aware of also, like the DP podcast and even they focus on a different side, and then Kaylee focuses on the H-1B visa side, and it's very easy for us to go, well, this is our biggest problem, and for the other group to go, well, this is our biggest problem. And I think that like you're saying, we have to come together and multitask. We have to put, ideally.
There's no reason why we can't.
Yeah.
Like we can
there's no reason why we can't. We have the personnel. We have the drive, and obviously we're getting the knowledge to focus on all the different sides of the attack. So
I think if you're just talking about Islam or you're just talking about H-1B, it's easy to get focused on a single issue. But to me, those two things are related to a central issue. And to me, the central issue is the preservation of our Western culture and our Christian values.
There we
And
go.
so if we're wanting to preserve that, because it is unique in the world, really, I mean, most parts of the world are nothing like America. And we have, all my life we were told that, America was exceptional. There was this notion of American exceptionalism. I don't even think, the average 15-year-old's never even heard that term, right?
Yeah.
And so, I would like to get back to that. And because I want my kids and grandkids and, future generations to have the opportunity and experience that is available in a country like that. And so, if we're going to preserve that, and it's under attack, that's the other thing too, is like, let's just look at what's happening throughout Western Europe, what's starting to happen here. Those things are under attack. They're hated by the left. They're hated by people from other countries. They come here claiming that they want to be a part of it, but then they get here and they don't become a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
They figure out how to scam it. They figure out, how they can conquer it. And so, are we going to defend our culture or not? If we don't, we're going to lose everything. And so to me, it is about Islam, and it is about the H-1B thing. Look, I've done this. Go talk to these groups of, call it like 25-year-olds, who are fresh out of college, who maybe couldn't get into the college they wanted to get into because they were, giving preference to people who weren't them. From other countries or what have you, different demographics, or checking some DEI box or whatever it was. So they were discriminated against there. Then they go to college, maybe they get their first job, or they apply for their first job, and maybe they don't get that position because the employer was having to check some DEI box. And so they were discriminated against there. Well, then they finally get a job, and then it's, maybe they worked a couple of years, and now it's time to maybe start thinking about getting a promotion. And they probably should get the promotion, but yet they're not getting it because, again, their employer, the HR department, run by liberal women, is, wanting to check some, some DEI box based on gender or ethnicity or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you, those people are going to be more radically right than our generation, because they literally have lived it there. And we had the benefit of seeing what it was like before, and all this is kind of new to us, and we're sort of waking up to this reality of what it looks like now, and we're like, wait, something's not right. They have actually lived it their whole life and been discriminated against their whole life, and so that they really see it.
Well, that's encouraging to me. That tells me that our numbers are growing, and if they're not growing, they're certainly becoming more pointed. Like, people are more willing to get engaged. But then you've always got the class that you're talking about that controls all of this, the college administrators and the white elites, the white female elites and the white male female elites.
Whatever you want to
call them, And so when we talk about what we were talking about earlier, fixing the problem with, we used London and Europe as the example of what needs to be done, move them out. Eventually, that's what we're going to have to do here in this country, is move them out. It seems to me like we're going to have a cultural revolution, because half of Americans, Biden voters, blue states, left-wing nut jobs, whatever, they're going to fight against that American exceptionalism that you want to bring back, that we want to bring back. They're going to fight against that.
Well, of course they are. But, are we going to just surrender, or are we going to do something? I mean, they've been fighting against it for a long time. And the problem is, I would argue that our side has essentially just surrendered to that. My entire life as a Republican, for as long as I can remember, I was told that, as Republicans, we need to, focus on low taxes, low regulation, those things. Right. We're not going to talk about all these other sort of, social issues, because, we need it. We're trying to grow the party. We're trying to bring people into our tent, and those are controversial, and, whatever. We're just not going to fight that hard on those. And well, what's happened in my lifetime on almost every single issue I can think of, the left has just taken massive ground, and our culture is way worse off for it. And so the question is, are we going to finally say no more? We're not going to surrender anymore, and we're going to start fighting. And that's what I think the people want. That's, when I traveled around and talked to people, that's what they say they want. So I think we are at a point where, I think politicians can take comfort knowing that the people are going to back them up. Just go do the right thing. And the people are going to reward you for that. They rewarded Donald Trump for it.
Absolutely.
They elected him 3 times, right?
So, they did elect him 3
He
times.
just answered one of my questions.
And I wouldn't mind a 4th time. But
it's one of my favorite memes is like, the scrolling presidential years is like 2028, 2032. It's like, Trump 2036, and just keeps going on into infinity.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Bo, this has been great, man. Thank you. Thank you for being here. We've got a litmus test that we ask all of our guests to just determine if they're liberal or conservative.
Hot seat.
I should have done my due diligence on this one.
Yeah. Should have.
This truly is going to be a surprise.
You're going to pass these with flying colors, man. So the first question is, when does life start?
At conception.
Great.
That scientists the world over have said that. They know that life begins at conception. It's not even up for debate.
I love that he added on. Like he just,
it's
didn't
great.
just say
It's
yes. He added. I love
great.
that. Second question is how many genders are there?
Well, there are 2 genders because they are rooted in biological sex, and that's encoded in our chromosomes. And you cannot change that.
Yeah.
Before I ask the other 2 questions, would you be open to debating someone on the podcast?
I've done that. So I was on another podcast, Tim Pool. I was on his podcast.
Yeah, I like Tim Pool.
And they asked me to come on and debate Suleiman Ahmed. And so, that was, he's a fast talking,
Jihadist.
Jihadist, yeah. That's the way I would.
I want you to come on.
What the funny thing is, super nice guy. Like, before the thing, we're like talking, getting along, and then the podcast started, and it's like, boy, it was fireworks.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The devil will always come at you.
I'm
with a
thinking
smile,
actually
that's what I say.
to get you to debate the trans activist that we had on. She's wanting to come back, or whatever. So I think you would be a great opposition to that person. We'll just say Kelly. Okay, we're gonna go to third question now. Third question is, what is a woman?
An adult human female is the correct definition of what is a woman.
All righty. And this is our last question. And this is our first time asking this question because we're trying to expand this litmus test. Was the 2020 election stolen? Can you answer that? Or
I was just giving the dramatic pause. I already talked about it. Look,
no, that's fine.
No, we already, look, it is, and with the benefit of time, more and more. We all suspected it. We all saw it in 2020.
Oh, it was obvious.
It was obvious then.
Yeah.
But now we have enough proof. Like enough stuff has been discovered that they know that, in these various swing states, they're like, well, how do you steal an election in an entire state? Well, you don't. You just have the biggest Democrat county. Wait until election night and determine how many votes they're behind, and then they just print up extra votes and stuff them in there. That's what they just did in LA to Spencer Pratt.
I literally was going to ask you about that.
100%. That's what they just did. They waited until, and Gavin Newsom was like, well, in California, we count every ballot. And it's like, well, no, you counted all the legal ballots, and then you waited until election day, and then you printed up a bunch of new ballots. And so, now you're counting the newly printed ballots.
Yeah.
So
which is why it's taking you over a week.
Yeah, you're counting every
ballots.
ballot. It's just a lot of them happened after election day.
Yeah.
So of the litmus questions that he just asked, we had a list, and some of them fell by the wayside because we didn't think they were, appropriate.
Litmusy enough.
They weren't litmusy enough. But as the future Texas Railroad Commissioner, I have to ask this question. Is Texas stolen land?
I didn't know he was going to ask that.
Texas is conquered land.
I love that. It's conquered land. Yes,
nothing is more offensive than these, just cucks who are like, it's conquered land. It's stolen land.
Stolen.
And it's like if they actually knew the history of what was happening, on this continent, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago before people were. But look, my ancestors have been here since the 1600s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
My family, is deep in America. And so, they were, many branches of my family were instrumental in, building businesses and building cities and making this country what it was. And so for people like me, that's just super offensive.
It is.
Because they created this country, based on an idea, of course, and rooted in their faith, of course. but because of the hard work and sacrifice that they all made, and they built this country.
Yeah.
And so to suggest that there was no country here, so how do you steal something that wasn't here?
Yeah. How do you still? And yet we still paid money for it. So it's not.
Yeah.
It's not stolen.
Yeah. The Louisiana Purchase. I don't know.
Louisiana Purchase.
How did we steal that?
It's in the name.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. Awesome.
Bo, thank you. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate
Great to
you
be
driving.
here.
Was it a long drive?
Well, I have an office in Dallas, so I was here.
Oh, you were here.
Yeah.
Okay,
good,
good. So this actually wasn't a long drive at all. It was in Dallas. Oh, awesome.
I'm about 5 minutes away from here.
Oh, no way.
Nice.
Okay. So when you said you were 10 minutes out, you haven't even gotten in your car yet.
Well, I was at dinner, so I was somewhere else for dinner.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and giving us your time. Because
Yeah,
I know
my
that's
pleasure.
a
Great
hot
to be here.
commodity right now is your time. And I know
thank
you're about to get very busy. But if you are open for the debate, I'll communicate with you to get it set up. And
Yeah, let's do that.
I do know that will be hot content.
Yeah,
So
that'd be good.
Yeah. It'd be fun.
if you're open to
Also.
it. And again, thank you for coming. We're going to go through our sponsors one more time. Patriot Mobile, patriotmobile.com/NRP or patriotmobile.com with the code NRP. Get your free month. Live Audio, LIVV audio.com. Put in the code NRP for your 15% discount on premium headphones. Nick's Right Podcast merch. You get the graphic novel Beyond Sight for $5 off, or get anything that you see my hat, Crisis King. We have a new hat that actually just became our bestseller called Make Jesus First Again. It looks like the Make America Great Again.
Yeah.
That we've sold 2 of those.
Love that.
Yeah, and that's our now bestseller because we sold 2.
We sold 2 of them.
Hey, I don't care. I'm glad it's selling. Thank you again for coming. Thank you guys for watching. We're going to pray and get out of here. Lord Jesus, saying thank you is not. I feel like it's not good enough anymore. But we do thank you. We do thank you for saving us. We thank you for dying for us. We thank you for loving us. We thank you for rising again on the 3rd day, and we thank you for the ability to live in a country that is free. Give us the wisdom. Give Bo the wisdom to continue to lead, to continue to make this state free and this country free. Shine through him. Speak through him, and even whenever the stumbling blocks or the trials come, just remind him of James 1:2-4, that consider it pure joy when we face trials of many kinds. And go before us. May you be praised, honored, and glorified. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks, guys.